Hello everybody, it is absolutely wonderful to be back standing in front of this very, very real starscape behind me. I am of course Sean Ferrick for Trek Culture, and it brings me no end of pleasure to say I am here with all of the ups and downs for basically the second half of the first part of the first season of Star Trek Prodigy. Now before we get into the whys and the wherefores, I won't bore you with the details as to why we had to stop the weekly episodes. It was to do with budgets and all that kind of crack, but we're here for today. I'm going to go through episodes from Kobayashi through to A Moral Star Part 2. So it's going to be a bit condensed, but I'm going to try and get as much covered as possible. Before going any further, please don't forget to like, share and subscribe. You are seriously helping the channel grow just by hitting the like button, but particularly by helping the subscribe button. That allows us to keep bringing out videos, new videos every single week, and to be honest, it really helps us with the ups and downs as well. So the more you subscribe, the more you are helping us do these kinds of videos. So thank you so much to everyone who has already subscribed, and if you wouldn't mind, just hit that button. Yous are all blading awesome. Now it's been a while, so let me explain the format of this video. We're going to go through everything that we liked and give it an up, and everything that we didn't like and we'll give it a down. And yeah, there's a bit to get through. So let's kick off. I'm going to go straight to the end. I'm going to rank these episodes. For me, Time Amok stands out as the strongest episode of this part of the season. Under that I would put Kobayashi, then I would put A Moral Star Parts 1 and 2 together, and then First Contact. That is not to say that First Contact was a bad episode, it wasn't by any means. It was just sandwiched in between these absolute greats. I suppose the first up I'm going to give of this block of episodes, I'm going to have to give it to Dal. His arc throughout the season, and I was very, very frustrated with him in the first half of the season because it felt like we weren't getting any payoff. I saw a little bit of pushback on this, that I was potentially being too hard on him. You know, he's an adolescent, he needs to learn, and absolutely. But what we got in those first 5 episodes, it felt like we were just getting, would you just go to bed, will you? And that was frustrating me because I don't want to feel that about my main character. However, with the 9 episodes together, yes, I can say that overall Dal has had a wonderful growth. It has frustrated at times, my downs still stand, but by the end of A Moral Star Part 2, I will say that yes, Dal's growth definitely gets an up from me. There's examples peppered throughout the episodes. Obviously, the entire episode of Kobayashi helps him advance as a character. So too does First Contact, because we get to see where he came from and what he grew up with, which really goes away toward explaining, alright, why he is the way that he is. And frankly, the fact that he turned out so well is nothing short of fantastic. There are some slips again along the way. He slips a little bit of Time Amok, but by the end of A Moral Star Part 2, I think we have the makings of a good acting captain here. There is no chance that I cannot praise the visuals of this season. I don't want to keep repeating myself, but how it's just wonderful. It is wonderfully realized and wonderfully executed. Star Trek Prodigy is probably, in my opinion, the most beautiful current Trek that we have. And that includes the fantastic visuals. Love him or hate him, Picard and Discovery have really been knocking it out of the park with the visuals. Lower Decks I love, but it's a totally different type of animation. Not that it's worse in any way, it certainly isn't. But for me, Prodigy is well and truly right at the cream of the crop when it comes to how good it looks. I want to sneak in now a cheeky down, and that is for the Diviner. I'm quite sad to give this down because when I heard John Noble had been cast in Star Trek Prodigy, I was thrilled. Absolutely thrilled. John Noble, for me, is just one of my favourite actors. Absolutely loved him ever since I saw him playing the world's worst father in Lord of the Rings. You know, Denethor. And then playing a pretty poor father in Fringe as well, as Walter Bishop. Now, fantastic show. And now we have him as a pretty poor father in Star Trek Prodigy, sensing a theme. It never really went anywhere. And that annoyed me. We just get an awful lot of like, where's my starship? Okay. He was a bit of a damp squib, I'm afraid to say. So the character as a villain didn't really work for me. and performance grand, but not an awful lot to work with. So I'm afraid the down is going to the diviner now for this. And also, now, in Moral Star Part 2, we get something of the reveal of the diviner's plan overall. When he gets aboard the protostar, we discover that the diviner, long since before, turned the ship into a sort of a weapon against the Federation. That there was something on board, which remains ill-defined, that was going to then pass from ship to ship to ship to ship in the Federation, which would eventually turn a massive civil war inside the Federation. What was an awful lot of the point of having to get the ship back from the kids? Because if they were just going to warp off to the Federation, which surely would have been a much easier tactic, is, great, you go deliver my weapon, I don't need to be on board for this. That's a down, because it doesn't really make any sense. Like, at all. Like, just let them deliver the weapon. Deliver the payload, lads. I would be remiss to not give the entire episode Kobayashi an up. Leonard Nimoy, James Doohan, Nichelle Nichols, Renee Auberjonois, and Gates McFadden all appear in the episode with a combination of archive footage and newly recorded dialogue. Gates McFadden recorded new dialogue for this episode, which means another Trek alum has returned to Star Trek, which seems to not get nearly enough fanfare at the time. Honestly, it really, really, really warmed my heart watching this. I remember watching this episode, I was just like, oh my God, I was not expecting this. And it's just wonderfully handled. There was some talk online about how some of the audio quality obviously doesn't match up with, let's say, Dal and Crusher's dialogue, which of course is fair in a way. I mean, this has aged quite a bit. Now, it's been cleaned up very, very well, and it is taken from all bits of the franchise, so some is actually not as old as others. I think there might be a cheeky line from Star Trek 2009 in there at one point, but it's quite hard to tell. The nostalgia which the episode exists, I would say almost purely. 5% of the episode advances Dal's arc. The other 95% of the episode, it's nostalgia. It's just pure nostalgia bait, and it totally works for me. For me, it makes me quite forgiving of any audio quality issues. And perhaps that is me being too forgiving. Perhaps I should be more harsh about these things, but this is my show and I do what I want. But also, let's not forget that in that episode as well, we had all of them. We also had Robert Beltran returned. So again, because Chakotay was captain of the Protostar. This is news. Yes, I'm pointing in that direction again because I'm pointing at the down. When this series is set, has been a bit of a headache. The time travel, not a bother. Not even a slight bit of a bother. Love a bit of time travel, I do. But it was very hard to pin down when exactly this series is set. Starfleet's able to send a ship to the Delta Quadrant in basically 2 jumps, right? Because when they warp over to the Gamma Quadrant, that's okay, grand, and another ship will take them to the Federation. So 2 jumps will get them to the Delta Quadrant. That's technology that we haven't seen before. It's not been explored in Lower Decks or Picard. It's not to say that it's not there, but it's not been explored. So if we then take that to mean that Prodigy is set after Picard, let's say we'll put it in the 2400s. There's the uniforms. Now again, I will joke till high heaven about, oh God, my bank account, oh God, so many uniforms. I love it. Please keep giving me your uniforms. I love it. But we have the uniforms that are shown aboard the Protostar, and they look more like kind of special ops uniforms as opposed to Starfleet standard. And then, of course, a scene in A Moral Star Part 2 seems to confirm this, because we get the appearance of Admiral Janeway. Not hologram Janeway, Admiral Janeway. And she seems to be it's something of a combination of late TNG, kind of like Endgame as well, because it has the side clothes, which I love. Then she doesn't appear to have aged very much. So it's said in Endgame that when Voyager encountered the Transwarp Hub, it would take, in normal time, a further 16 years to get home, 10 years after which Admiral Janeway decides to go back in time. Admiral Janeway with her silver lovely hairdo and the more endgamey of the 2 uniforms. So 26 years after Voyager ended up getting home, we have a different style of uniform and different style of hairstyle. Now, look, I know that's a tenuous thing to base that on, Admiral Janeway's hair color, but it does leave so many questions, right? So does that mean then that we must be beyond the 2380s, because we've seen what the duty uniform looks like, the 2380s, both in Lower Decks and in Picard. 2390s, we've seen what the duty uniform looks like, because we've seen it on Narissa, Commodore O, Acting Captain Riker. Okay, so moving on then to the 2400s, we could be moving closer to endgame time. Works well for me. Love the return of that comm badge. Love that. But it's a headache. When the bloody hell is this thing set? Because we know there's time travel, and the Diviner has traveled back in time to get the protostar, only by 50 years. So is it 50 years in the future? We know that age doesn't really matter. Sure, Admiral McCoy was 137 years old in Encounter at Farpoint, and he was grand. So, I am sure that this will be answered in the second half of the season. But just for now, that's down because it was a headache and it annoyed me. Up, Dreadnought, scary as balls.
Balls are scary.
Scary as balls. Jimmy Simpson smashing it. Admiral Janeway. Kate Mulgrew has been brilliant in the season overall as hologram Janeway. We've seen a couple of different facets. We've seen supportive, we've seen giving you a dressing down, we've seen confused, we've seen, we've seen quite a lot. She's been really, really good, and I love the fact that she puts so much faith in these clearly not cadets, but clearly pretty cool. And then in the very last scene of A Moral Star Part 2, we get Admiral Janeway warping off to save Chakotay. So we definitely get a couple of different versions of Janeway in this series. And Kate Mulgrew, I'm so delighted that she's here for it, that we have these different versions of the character. Lovely seeing Admiral Janeway, if only for a moment. I love, of course, that she was introduced with a coffee mug, because, of course. Love the upgrade to hologram Janeway, that she can now become, well, not corporeal, but tangible, at least. She's able to stop the Diviner, put it that way. Janeway is a character in this show. She's not simply a plot along. And that has been a pleasant surprise as the season has gone on. So delighted for Janeway overall. Delighted that Admiral Janeway is here, because this is the canonical return of Admiral Janeway to Star Trek. It's set after Nemesis quite a bit, so yeah, I'm bloody here for it. Rock Talk, as played by Riley Alizraki. Now, Time Amok hit me right in the feels, because Rock Talk spends potentially years alone on the protostar learning how to save her friends. And she is and has always been presented as a child. Whereas the rest seem to be adolescents, she's very much a little girl. And she becomes the show's biggest hero. And that has been fantastic. And Riley Alizraki, she's played her, she hasn't just leaned on, say, the cuteness of the young voice. There is strength there. There's enough pushback when she says to Janko Bog, I can do more than keep a door closed. Stop assigning me to security duty. I can do more. And she proves it time and time again. Time Amok is her big episode, but she gets the payoff in A Moral Star Part 2 as well, that she is able to help repair the Rev 12's engines. It's been, again, less of an arc than Dal, but certainly a great coming out of her shell. I suppose, pardon the pun, brie car, shells, I'm so funny, lol. If I was to give it down, not enough Chakotay. I don't think we have enough mystery yet about Chakotay. We know he was captain of the Protostar. Obviously, we don't know when. We don't know where he is. That's fine. Part of it can go find Chakotay, but it does seem like there's two separate storylines there. Because we have Admiral Janeway. Obviously, she's found the Protostar, which is grand. There was talk last week, would they detect the proto jump? And yes, they did. Great. Good on you, Starfleet, keeping track of your ships. So where was Chakotay this whole time? Obviously, this is going to play into the second part of the first season, but it's very, give us more. Give us more, Beltron. Robert, if you're listening to this, give me more. Up, USS Dauntless. Hello, blast from the past. Also, that reconciles a little bit of an issue, doesn't it? Because the Dauntless obviously was Arturus' ship in Hope and Fear. It wasn't actually a Federation starship. It was just sort of commandeered to look that way. Then in Enterprise Azati Prime, we see the Dauntless fighting in that battle. And it's always been a kind of a nice Easter egg, but kind of didn't really make sense. Now we see Admiral Janeway aboard the USS Dauntless. So basically, the crew of Voyager said, oh my god, this bad person tried to have us assimilated, but you know what, I'm robbing his ship design. And I love it. Why wouldn't you? It's a bloody good ship design. So yeah, we get the USS Dauntless is now a canon Starfleet ship. Eagle Moss, bring it on. Now, just a couple of last ups before we head off. One is the use of Zero as a weapon. That was dark in A Moral Star Part 2, because Zero has the power to drive the observer insane, and he does. He unmasks himself and drives the diviner insane. It's kind of a fate worse than death, really, what happens when you look on the Medusans. Unleashing of this weapon, it's slightly darker than I was expecting Star Trek Prodigy to go. I was going to say Star Trek Discovery. No, Star Trek Discovery would definitely go this dark. They would have no problem. They would have 75 zeros. But in Prodigy, this was dark, and it was a good surprise, because it was used at kind of the zenith of Zero's fight back against the diviner. So yeah, that was definitely an up. Just to finish this on a comedic up is the Unwanted finally being able to communicate with each other. We get Arcation decapitating Dreadnought, which was great, but also, did anyone else just get the feels when Gjordslot and Jordo were about to express their deep, meaningful love for each other? And Dal was just like, this is lovely, we don't have time for this, this is lovely. But that was very nice. I did like that, because it was something, I have to say, it sort of slipped my mind that of course they couldn't talk to each other. Because, exactly, they didn't have a universal translator. Again, Prodigy, thank you for that. I think that was really, really good. Now, it gives me no end of pleasure to say this sentence, but won't you please come and join me at Cetacean Observations? The pad returns. Now, clearly I could be here until Sunday going through all of Cetacean Observations, so I will do as many as I can. I am going to miss some. I beg your indulgence and forgiveness, but please, now let's have a go. All right, Uhura, Spock, Dr. Crusher, Odo, Scotty. A lot of lines really referencing Balance of Terror. Only change being, Balance of Terror, they were fighting the Romulans, it was the Klingons and the Kobayashi Maru. Still, awesome, a lot of there is a wonderful breakdown online by user Ryan Edits, where he basically goes through each episode where the line is from. I thoroughly recommend it. Okay, the bridge of the Enterprise D, TOS era uniforms, not Strange New World or Discovery era uniforms. It's definitely TOS era. So that's obviously a deliberate choice. But technically, that means we could see an evolution back into the TOS style. I don't think we will, canonically, if I'm very honest. Obviously, the Enterprise itself has gone through such a change. I don't see the Enterprise becoming the Matt Jeffries version, but you never know. But yes, they made the deliberate choice to use TOS era uniforms for Spock and Uhura. Monster Maroon, best uniform, fight me. The Kobayashi Maru itself, with lines lifted directly from Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. The return of Chakotay, looking fantastic, I might add. Very nice visuals there for that one. Now we have the Game headset from the episode The Game from TNG. We have on the holodeck, we have Caliphie. Janeway shows them the two Lurpas from Amok time. We have the option of skydiving on SETI Alpha 5. Now, skydiving also could easily be a reference to the original opening of Star Trek Generations, or the Voyager episode Extreme Risk. Why don't you try a Jane Eyre holo novel? Of course, that is from Star Trek Voyager. They talk about potentially visiting Deadwood, which is a fistful of datas, or going to the Paxao Resort, which was, of course, the tropical resort that was in Star Trek Voyager on the holodeck. When they go to the Ferengi, they hit reference to the phage from the Fideans. Obviously, the rules of acquisition are dropped more than... I won't make that joke. There's a reference to the Klingon cloaking device, which in fact becomes quite a plot point. That is almost directly from the Emperor's New Cloak. In fact, it's the same design of cloaking device. There's a Horgon. Of course there's a Horgon. She uses a Klingon disruptor. She's aboard the Ferengi Decor Marauder. That ship is beautiful, and they could have used any other ship they wanted. They brought the one back from TNG that made one cameo in Voyager. That was stunning. Of course, she talks about losing on her hand in Dabo. The whole Amok, or Time Amok episode is a fairly large reference to the episode Shattered from Voyager, where Voyager is broken into different time periods. Now, the time effect in that episode as well is very evocative of the voyage home. Now, there is almost definitely a veritable ton of Easter eggs that I have missed in Cetacean Observations. But let's have some fun. Drop them into the comments below. Get in touch with us on Twitter as well, because I think we will be analysing these episodes for some time to come. I hate to say it, but that is it for our episode today. Star Trek Prodigy Season 1 Part 1, for me, massive, massive thumbs up. It is honestly one of the stronger, and I'm actually finding myself saying this more and more, it's one of the stronger opening seasons of a Star Trek series that we've had. Potentially that honour is still held by Lower Decks. See, Lower Decks is like, we had a closed 10 episode season. Prodigy, of course, has another set of episodes to go through later on in 2022. So they could completely drop the ball, or it could remain good, remain Klingon, but it could remain good, and I think it will. Based on what we've seen, I have confidence. I very much look forward to going through Prodigy in its second half of its first season. Look, I want to do the ups and downs for those videos. We will keep you updated. If we can do them, we will. What I can say for sure is that I will be back next week with the ups and downs for the next episode of Star Trek Discovery, which returns next week. So, until then, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for joining us. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Yous are bleeding legends. You can catch us over on Twitter at Trek Culture. You can catch myself at Sean Ferrick over on Twitter as well. You look after yourselves, you look after your friends and family, and for the love of all things, you live long and prosper. Thank you.